When I think about my own story, I harken back to a trip I took to the Soviet Union when I was 17 years old. I went with USY, which was the conservative youth group that I was active in. And I recall that the day before we went into the Soviet Union, we met with the chief rabbi of the British Empire, Emanuel Yakubovitz. And he said to us, we were all young and excited and ready to save Soviet Jewry. And he says, keep in mind that you have more to learn from Soviet Jews than you have to give them. It was a very kind of humbling moment and took the wind out of our sails for a moment, but I realized how true that was. Because as I spent the next couple of weeks in the Soviet Union, meeting people who would later on become the heroes of the Soviet Jewry movement, Yuli Kasharovsky, Yuli Edelstein, Ida Nudel, Natan Sharansky, I realized that here are people who are risking their life and their liberty for something that I took totally for granted. And that was true for everyone in our group. We all were raised in middle-class Jewish households and had the privilege of a strong Jewish upbringing. But here we were transported not just a couple thousand miles, but 1,000 years back in Jewish history and realized that this was the story and the experience of our ancestors. When I came back to America, I had a newfound appreciation for Jewish life, but even more so, I was driven with a mission to try and talk about why we shouldn't take Judaism for granted. And I think the entire trajectory of my life and my career all evolves from that moment. I'll tell you one quick story. I was in an apartment in Moscow, and a young woman who was about 20 years old looks me in the eye and she says, and by the way, they were there surreptitiously. They weren't supposed to be gathering. The Soviet Jews had this courage. They wanted to be with each other. They needed each other. She says, in a few days, you're going to go back to America, the freest country on earth. She says, I need to ask you not to forget me and my friends because you have the power to save us. Now, for most American Jewish teenagers, their main obligations are do your homework, clean up your room, and once in a while, your mom and dad might ask you to take out the garbage. And suddenly, what I was obligated to do got ramped up to a whole different level. And I've spent the next 25, 30 years, not only active for Soviet Jewry, but to try and be a support for Jews around the world and Jews here in America.